All federal agencies are telling workers to report back to work after the president signed the short-term funding bill Wednesday night.
As election season intensifies in the U.S., the IMF has issued a stark warning to the U.S. about its rising debt and fiscal deficits.
The world's most powerful economy has just been warned. Not by a YouTuber, not by social media, but by the International Monetary Fund. And what they said is not comforting. They are not panicking. They are not guessing. They are doing what they always do before global shifts happen. They are warning. If you think the US economy is strong, if you think America will always bounce back, if you think this does not affect you, watch carefully, because this warning affects everyone. This warning is not about panic or headlines. It is about signals smart economies never ignore. Because when global institutions speak quietly, history usually listens later. What is the IMF and why this warning matters? Before we go further, let us be clear. The IMF does not speak casually. The International Monetary Fund oversees global financial stability. They advise governments. They monitor debt. They step in when economies collapse. When the IMF speaks bluntly, it means the data is already screaming. This warning is not about tomorrow. It is about what is building silently right now. And the US is at the center of it. The warning in simple words. Here is the core message. The US economy is becoming increasingly vulnerable, not because Americans stopped working, not because innovation ended, but because the system is under pressure from multiple directions at once. High debt, rising interest costs, political uncertainty, and slowing global growth. On their own, these are manageable. Together, they become dangerous. The IMF is not predicting a collapse. They are warning about fragility, and fragile systems break suddenly. The debt problem no one likes to talk about. Let us talk numbers. The US national debt has crossed $34 trillion. That number is so big it feels unreal, but interest on that debt is very real. The US now spends more on interest payments than on national defense. Pause and think about that. Money that could build infrastructure, money that could support innovation, money that could stabilize the economy. Instead, it goes to interest. The IMF warns this path is unsustainable, not dramatic, just math. Why high interest rates change everything. For years, cheap money saved the system. Now that era is over. Interest rates are high and staying high. This affects everything. Mortgages become expensive. Businesses delay expansion. Consumers spend less. But the biggest impact is here. Government debt becomes harder to manage. Every rate increase means billions more in interest. The IMF sees this as a slow tightening rope, not instant collapse, but increasing pressure. Politics is making the economy weaker. This is uncomfortable, but necessary. Political division is now an economic risk. Government shutdown threats, debt ceiling battles, policy paralysis. Markets hate uncertainty. The IMF warns that repeated fiscal standoffs damage confidence, not opinions. Confidence. When investors doubt leadership, they hesitate. And hesitation slows economies. The global ripple effect. Here is where it gets bigger than America. The US dollar is the backbone of global finance. When the US struggles, the world feels it. Emerging markets suffer capital outflows. Currencies weaken. Debt becomes harder to repay. The IMF warns that US instability can trigger global stress. This is not about borders. It is about interconnected systems. One major crack spreads fast. Why this time feels different? People say this every decade, but the IMF points out something new. There is less room for error. In the past, governments could cut rates fast. They could borrow cheaply. They could stimulate aggressively. Now, debt is already high. Rates are already elevated. Political trust is low. The safety cushions are thinner. That changes the game. The silent threat of long-term stagnation. Here is a part of the IMF warning that did not grab headlines, but it should have. The risk is not just a crisis, it is stagnation, slow growth, rising costs, fewer opportunities. The IMF points out that the US economy may face years of weaker expansion if current trends continue, not a dramatic crash. Something more dangerous, a gradual loss of momentum. Stagnation is harder to fight than recession because people adapt to it and leaders delay action. Why productivity is worrying economists. Productivity sounds boring, but it is everything. Productivity determines how fast an economy can grow without overheating. The IMF highlights a troubling pattern. Despite technology, despite automation, despite artificial intelligence hype, productivity growth remains weak. That means higher wages become harder to sustain. Living standards rise slower. Inflation pressures return faster. An economy that cannot grow efficiently starts relying on debt, and that loops back to the same problem. The risk of policy misjudgment. The IMF also warns about something subtle. One wrong policy move could amplify existing stress. Cut rates too early, inflation returns; hold rates too long, growth stalls; spend aggressively, debt balloons. Cut spending sharply, confidence drops. There is very little margin for error. This is not a forgiving environment. That is why coordination matters more than ever. Why global investors are watching closely. Global investors do not wait for confirmation. They react to signals. Rising U.S. risk perceptions can shift capital fast. Money moves to safer assets. Markets become volatile. Financing costs rise. The IMF warns that sentiment can turn quickly, and once it turns, it is hard to reverse. The core message behind this warning: this is not about fear. It is about awareness. The U.S. economy is still powerful, but power without balance creates instability. The IMF is not asking for panic. They are asking for seriousness. The labor market is strong but fragile. Yes, jobs numbers still look decent, but the IMF sees warning signs underneath. Wage growth is slowing. Productivity gains are weak. This means households feel pressure even if employment remains high. People feel squeezed, and squeezed, consumers pull back. That slows growth quietly. The real risk is complacency. This may be the most important point. The IMF warns against assuming the U.S. is immune. Past success does not guarantee future stability. Confidence becomes dangerous when it turns into denial. The biggest risk is ignoring early signals. History shows collapses rarely come with sirens. They come with silence. What the IMF says must change. The warning also includes solutions. Not easy ones, but necessary ones. Long-term fiscal discipline, clear debt management plans, political cooperation on economic priorities. This is not about austerity, it is about sustainability. Short-term comfort creates long-term pain. What this means for ordinary people. You might be thinking, how does this affect me? Here is how. Higher borrowing costs, slower growth, less economic flexibility. Economic stress always reaches households eventually, not overnight, but gradually. Prepared people adapt faster. Why this warning should not be ignored. The IMF does not chase headlines. They speak when trends become unavoidable. This warning is not fear. It is foresight. The goal is not panic. It is preparation. The U.S. still has enormous strengths, but strength without discipline becomes weakness. The big question. No one is asking. Here is the real question. Will leaders act before the pressure becomes a crisis? Or will they wait until choices disappear? Every major economic crisis had warnings. Most were ignored. The IMF did not say the U.S. economy will collapse. They said the risks are rising. That difference matters. This is a moment, a window, a chance to correct course. History remembers countries that acted early and punishes those that delayed. The warning has been issued. What happens next depends on choices. If this opened your eyes, if this made you think differently about the economy, if this gave you perspective beyond headlines, like this video. Subscribe for deeper stories that actually matter. Share this with someone who still thinks this does not affect them, because the future is shaped by those who pay attention early.